just an update about our hurricane relief that many of you gave to. And so we just always strive to be as transparent as possibly. And so it's cool to have a relationship, a connection with a fellow church that will be a part of that relief process for those that were impacted by both of those hurricanes for years to come. And so just want to say thank you for the generosity of many of you. Well, today we kick off a new teaching series for the month of December called Christmas at the Movies. And so by show of hands, how many of you have already watched a Christmas movie at some point this year? Okay, so almost most of you. How many of you, like Christmas season started November 1st? Like show of hands, how many of you are the sociopaths in the room who, like, you can't even wait till Thanksgiving? I mean, what is wrong with you people? No, so we are doing this series. We've talked about this series multiple times throughout multiple years, and it's probably going to be like the cheesiest series we've ever done. It's going to be like the series where it's just like, why are we even doing this? And because the whole premise of this Christmas at the Movie series is what we're going to do is we're going to take, who's ever preaching is going to take one of their favorite Christmas movies, and they'll pull out some biblical theme from it that you can maybe talk about it later. You can share it with your kids. And because we love Christmas around here, what it stands for, God with us, Emmanuel, Jesus. But we're going to have a little bit of fun for the next couple weeks with this series. And so today we are kicking off what I believe is the greatest Christmas movie of all time, which is Elf. How many Elf fans in the room? Right? Okay, good. A good collection of you. If you've never seen Elf before, I'm going to highly recommend at some point in the next couple weeks you take some time to watch it. But here's what Elf is about. This is the synopsis from the writer of the movie. It says this, is that this hilarious Christmas film tells the tale of a young orphan child who mistakenly crawls into Santa's bag of gifts on Christmas Eve and is transported back to the North Pole, raised as an elf. Years later, as an adult, Buddy learns that he is not really an elf after all and goes on a journey to New York City to find his true identity. Go ahead, roll the clip.
Mad at me?
No.
Sure?
Yes, I'm sure. Just do your job.
Okay. Wow.
This is the North Pole.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. Where's the snow?
Why are you smiling like that?
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
Make work your favorite. That's your favorite, okay?
Okay.
Work is your new favorite.
Fine.
It's time for the announcement. Okay, people, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Santa's coming to town.
Santa! Oh, my God! Santa here? I know him. I know him.
He'll be here to take pictures with all the children.
Yeah.
Just keep your receipts. 10 a.m. tomorrow.
10 a.m. tomorrow.
Santa's coming to town.
Yes.
Can you sign this for me?
Oh, hi. Santa's coming.
The whole film kind of revolves around Will Ferrell's character, this disillusion that he believes he's an elf, so on and so forth. But one of the things that's apparent from that clip and throughout most of the movie is he believes he is somebody because he knows Santa. He believes that he's important. He believes that he has a role to play in the Christmas spirit. That whole, I know him, gives him this air of irrational confidence. And I want to use that as a springboard for us today to ask you that question of how do you know that you're somebody in life today? How would you answer that question? How do you know if you are somebody in life today? You see, we spend a lot of time, energy, effort, sizing ourselves up compared to one another. Today's world says, you know you're somebody by your title. You know you're somebody based on your salary. You know you're somebody based on how many letters you have at the end of your name, what neighborhood you live in, how many followers on social media you have. You know you're somebody if you belong to one of those exclusive clubs. And it's interesting because this is a question that's as old as time. Even 2,000 years ago, Jesus' closest followers, his disciples, asked a form of this question. And Jesus gives them a response that kind of catches them off guard. They're essentially going to ask Jesus, just how do we know? How do we know if we are somebody in your eyes? How do we know if we are somebody in the kingdom of heaven? So he gives them an answer that might surprise them and a little bit us the same. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to join me in Matthew chapter 18 this morning. Matthew chapter 18. As you're turning there, we just want to say, again, welcome. We're so glad that you are with us. If you do not own a Bible, we would love to give you one. If you can stop off at First Step on your way out, we'd love to greet you, answer any questions that you may have about our church, and give you a Bible as just a way of our saying, thanks for being here. Because every single week, we turn to the Word of God, not just to know what it says, but to allow it to transform our hearts and minds as disciples of Jesus. And so we are continuing or kicking off this teaching series with this idea of what does it mean? What does it look like to have childlike faith? Buddy the Elf, the whole entire film was around this adult male who has childlike faith and who he believes that he is. And so today's text, Matthew chapter 18, found near the back of your Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the four Gospels that give us a biography of the life of Jesus, kind of is this large section in which Jesus is teaching through multiple chapters in Matthew of here is what the kingdom of heaven is. This is what it's about. This is what I came to usher into this world and your part in it that has to do with some self-denial in community of other believers. So we're picking up in Matthew chapter 18 this morning. If you're there, say, smiling's my favorite. All right, you guys I just thought I was going to get some of you. All right, Matthew chapter 18, pens at the ready. Let's dive in, verses 1 through 5. This is what it says. It says, at that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And he called the little child to him, and he placed the child among them, and he said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like, you can underline that phrase, become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the, highlight this, lowly position of this child is the, there it is again, greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. Who is the greatest? They asked Jesus. Who's the greatest? Jesus, out of all of us 12, you've got to like one of us a little bit more than the other. One of us has to be a little higher up on the scale or ranking than everybody else. Who's the greatest? And it's interesting because this question was probably more of a reference to Jesus' disciples wanting to know who is the eldest son. For they thought that Jesus, as he came as Messiah, was going to establish an earthly kingdom, that he was going to establish a political power. And so they wanted to know, Jesus, who do you believe is number one out of all of us? Who is the eldest son? Because the eldest son was the one who got a double portion of the inheritance. If this man's going to run the whole world, then I want to have the most. And so they began to have a little bit of a goat debate with one another. You guys ever have a goat debate? Goat, G-O-A-T, greatest of all time. It's one of the favorite things for us guys to just, when we're sitting around, got nothing to do, we'll debate who is the greatest of all time. And so we're going to have a little goat debate. I need your interaction this morning. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture or of a sport or a thing, and I just want you to shout out what you believe, who or what is the greatest of all time in these categories. You guys with me? You guys ready to do this? Okay, here we go. Here's the first one. When it comes to the sport of basketball, greatest of all time, just shout it out. A lot of Michael Jordan, which is, I believe, is the correct answer. There's oftentimes this debate, is it Michael Jordan or LeBron James? Some people sprinkle in some Bill Russell. I'm a Kobe guy, but I got Jordan's the GOAT. He's the number one. Here's the second one. When it comes to the sport of golf, who's the GOAT? A lot of you are like, I don't even care about golf. Golf's stupid. It's boring. Usually comes down to one of two guys, Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus. Sometimes people say Ben Hogan, the purest golf swing of all time. All right, we just had Thanksgiving, all right? So what about Thanksgiving meal? What's the GOAT food at Thanksgiving? Green bean casserole, turkey, mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, okay? Some good ones there. All right, what about this? We're Christmas at the movies. How about, what's the greatest Christmas movie, guys? Die Hard, yes. Men die every year. It's a Christmas movie, I swear. Christmas Vacation, also top of the list for me, next to Elf. How about this? Greatest musical artist of all time. Musical artist or group? Taylor Swift, come on. Come on. She's got to die first. She's got to die first. According to Rolling Stone, it's the Beatles, followed by Beethoven, right? Okay. Okay, and then how about one more? The greatest TV sitcom of all time. Parks and Rec, Friends, How I Met Your Mother, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's The Office. Moving on. All right, we're moving on. You know, so Jesus' disciples, they're having this debate. Jesus, who's the greatest of all time? Who is the greatest in your eyes in your kingdom? And they're probably having this debate because the religiosity of the time of Jesus in the ancient Middle East 2,000 years ago, there was like a ranking. And they were constantly, these groups of people were vying to discern who was the most spiritual. See, at the top of the chart, they had the high priest, the Levites, the Levitical priests. You have the great priest and then the great high priest. They lived in lavish luxury. They atoned for the sins of all of the people, most specifically the Hebrew people, Yom Kippur and the other high holy days. But that was their job. And they were sometimes referred to as sons of God because of how close they were seen to be with God. Beneath them was the Pharisees. And that term Pharisee literally means to be separate, to be set apart is who the Pharisees were. And they were these people who they saw in order for us to love God and be loved by God, we need to preserve the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible in the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, or the Pentateuch. And so they actually created additional ways and obligations and additional books like the Mishnah of here is how we preserve the law, which is a good thing. It's a good thing to preserve the law of Moses in that. Then you had this next group of people. They were referred to as the Sadducees. And they were like the smarty pants of the group who all went to law school and became lawyers for the religious system. They made up this group that was called the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, though, where they kind of got a little askew, is they became buddies with Rome. And they thought to themselves, if we are buddies with Rome and Rome ever wants to do something in our religion, we're going to be the ones who get the nod. And then you had this weird kind of extra group. They were like the Cousin Eddies of the spiritual system. They were just kind of out there. They're a little wild, known as the Essenes. And they believed everyone was crazy. Everyone was corrupt, and so they lived in religious seclusion up in the hills, and they were often the scribes, and they were copying down the manuscripts. If you ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, as they were found in an Essene community. And so they thought, we just need to get away from everyone in order for us to love and follow God as best we can. And so these groups would constantly argue, we're right, we're better, we're more spiritual, we're holier, we're closer to God. But now you have these uneducated fishermen. These working class rejects are the ones with the Messiah. They're the ones following Jesus around. They're like, can you believe this? Like, look at us. Whoever thought we'd be in, look at us, we're in. We got clout, baby. We got to do something with this. And so they begin to have this debate. Who's the greatest, Jesus? And it's funny because they have this debate more than one time. At the Last Supper, Jesus is going to kind of re-answer this question again because they're arguing who gets to sit on your right and who's on your left. And so Jesus decides to make a point. And he says, you need to have childlike faith like a child. You see, that would have blown their minds because children had no worth or value back then. They had no social clout. They had no merit or rank. There's a 50% mortality rate of children back in that time. They were seen as weak, vulnerable, helpless, unimportant. They were utterly dependent. Kind of the opposite of how we as adults like to be viewed. We like to be viewed in regards to our strength, our wisdom, our self-sufficiency. And so Jesus says, unless you become like this child, you cannot enter my kingdom. Now, the idea of childlike faith isn't about their innocence. It's not about their purity of heart, their simplicity, their imagination. It was in reference that they had no merit or self-promotion to offer. So what if I said to you, in order for you to belong to the family of God, you have to believe and know you bring nothing to the table. that you have nothing to show for it, that Jesus would find you even more worthy or admirable to welcome you in. You cannot earn your keep into the kingdom of heaven. You see, I think a lot of us, that it rubs us the wrong way. You're just like, what? Bro, come on. You're telling me that my whole life and all that I do and all that I am and all that I can provide and all that I can kind of show the world, that all of that is worth nothing in the eyes of Jesus? You're telling me that I have no merit of my own, that I cannot earn my own favor in the eyes of God, that I cannot at least do something valuable? Is that really what you're trying to tell me? And then deep down, I think this is what happens. Deep down, if we're honest with ourselves, there's a sigh of relief. There's something deep down that nourishes our soul because Jesus is telling us something we already know. And we spend all this time and all of these years and we buy things posturing to everyone else around us, but Jesus is already just meeting us where we are. Because we know Jesus is kind of right about this. Man, I'm nobody special. I've got a few people fooled over there. She's a little deceived. She thinks I'm way better than I am. But I know the truth about myself. Jesus is just telling me what I already know. And not only is Jesus telling us something we already know about ourselves, he's okay with it. He's okay with it. That's the beautiful thing that is so pleasing to my soul. It is deeply satisfying when Jesus says, you have nothing to offer me. I already love you. I already welcome you. I already have a way in. It has nothing to do with your clout, your status, or what you can offer. Just come home. And Jesus does this by welcoming a little child. Jesus, who's the greatest? Child, come here. Places that child in the middle of these arguing adolescents. Greatness in my kingdom is not determined by one's preeminent rank or social clout or their own religious goodness or morality, but having childlike faith. So what does it mean? What does it look like to have childlike faith? I think there's two key attributes I see in this text. Here's the first one, is childlike faith means we heed our helplessness. That we pay attention to the fact that we are helpless. A word that comes to mind, some of your translations use this phrase, unmerited. You see, children were known for more of what they could not do in that time. They couldn't fight, they couldn't lead, they didn't have any wisdom, they couldn't own land or property, they couldn't procreate, they couldn't make money. There was nothing impressive about children. They were just needy little boogers that they're kind of like sucker fish onto the side of your life, and they just sucked out all of the resources and energy and stuff that you have. And that's what they were seen as. And some of you are like, accurate. That's what kids are like. I remember when we brought our son Jude home, I shared last week, he was born about 7 weeks premature, so he was in the hospital for a couple days. Like, we took this dude home, like we put him in a preemie onesie, and he was like drowning. We could have wrapped like 3 times over. We put him in a car seat, and dude, little homie had like his own little personal boat, like that he just got to chill in. And he's going, and he's just chilling, whatever. And so we take him home, and we place him so gently, I put him so gently into his crib. And then Diane and I looked at each other like, all right, now what? Right? Like, you're just kind of like, what do we do now? Like, we know we're going to have to feed him and change him. We're checking on him like 17 times a night. Okay, he's still breathing. Okay, he's still breathing. Okay, he's still breathing. And then he gets older, and he's healthy, and he's smart, and he's got an attitude, got it from his mom probably. And now he's 8 years old. And we still have to feed him and kind of change him. But we don't check on him 17 times a night. He checks on us. You know, where they come like breathe in your face. Just making sure you're still alive. I love you. And then he runs off and goes to bed. Here's the thing. Jude's an amazing kid. Love this kid to death. He has done absolutely nothing to gain entrance into our family. The dude doesn't pay rent. He doesn't say, hey, mom, dad, let me get my own Happy Meal this time. I know all that you've done. Let me just get my own this once. No. He does nothing. If we disappeared for like 2 hours, He'd be curled up in a ball, freaking out, not knowing what to do. And that's the point. Because you and I, we are little children before God. We are helpless. We are utterly reliant. There is nothing merited about us that welcomes our seat into the family of God. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Can I just tell you this morning is that's how God sees you? Can I just remind you, or maybe for the first time let you know that that's how God sees you? That you are utterly, desperately loved by the God of the universe. And he knows you're helpless. He knows there's not a whole lot going on that you can prove worth or value in the kingdom of heaven. He knows it's been a week. It's been a month. It's been a life. And there's not a whole lot to show for it. He knows, and yet he says, come home, son. Come home, daughter. Well, what do I got to do to show that I belong? What do I got to do to show you, Jesus, that I am lovable? What do I have to do to prove my worth around here? And he says, you can't. There's absolutely nothing you can do. Just like this child, you are great because you are mine. And that is it. It's an either yes or no. Do you want to be in my family or not? And if the answer is yes, come in with all of your helplessness. Or if the answer is no, go on and try it your own way. You see, earthly kingdoms say to us, show me your worth. Show me you're valuable. Show me you're somebody. You know that God helps those who helps themselves, right? It reminds me of the character from Elf, Miles Finch, the angry elf. And they're having that argument, and because Buddy's just being annoying, joyous, kind of childlike in his demeanor. And he's like, oh, you're an angry elf. And he says, I got houses in LA, Paris, and Vail, each with a 70-inch plasma screen, which today we're like, that's not that impressive, actually. AKA, don't you know who I am, what I've done, what I'm capable of? That's the kingdom of earth. But the kingdom of heaven says, be childlike. Know you're helpless. Know you're unmerited. It's a beautiful thing because of the love and the grace and the open arms of King Jesus. The second part of childlike faith, I believe, is embracing our unimportance. We need to embrace the fact that we are unimportant people. That phrase that I had you kind of underline, take a lowly position, meant to humble oneself intentionally, to assign yourself a lower rank. Kind of like, I'm going to be proud about the fact that I'm a nobody. Like imagine with me for a moment that you went to like an Ivy League college for a second, right? And you walked in, I didn't go, but let's say you went to Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And you walk Harvard, and I would imagine to some degree at the freshman orientation week, all of the students are probably trying to compare themselves to one another. What did you get on the SAT? What did you get on the ACT? What awards and accolades did you get? I had more extracurriculars. Well, I got this and I got that, whatever. And then imagine you just kind of show up, because I'm just assuming most of you are like me. You have no business attending Harvard. And you walk up and you're just like, what up, y'all? Yeah, okay, cool. How's it going? And it's like, yeah, man. And they're all talking about this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I did. Well, what about you? What did you do to get in? Guys, craziest thing. I didn't even apply. What? What do you mean? How are you even here in the first place? You had to have done something to prove to yourself that you belong. No, man. I didn't even apply because it would have been a waste of my time and money and their time and money. They could not have denied me faster. Well, then what are you doing here then? Craziest thing, I came home from school one day and I went out to the mailbox and I had this big old letter with that crimson H stamped on the front. And I opened it and it said, congratulations, you have been admitted into Harvard with a full ride scholarship signed from the president himself. What? Let me see that. And they're looking at this. Well, how did you do it? You got to be somebody. No, I'm just kind of an average guy. Okay, your parents have to be like filthy, filthy rich. Nope, they're kind of average parents. Well, like are you like a low-key celebrity or something? Nope, I'm just a regular human being. Well, then how are you even here in the first place? I have no idea. But now that I am, I'm going to take advantage of every single moment. I'm not going to waste it. And I think the same thing goes in the kingdom of heaven. It's hard for people and for us ourselves to intentionally develop lowliness. It's hard to be the first to serve instead of wait to be served. It's hard to be the first to forgive when we want to get bitter. It's hard to be the first to encourage after the other person's been a jerk face. Valuing others above ourselves is not natural. So I was thinking about this of like childlike faith, embracing the fact that we're all kind of unimportant. I don't want to like spoil your milk, but at some point you're going to die. Don't know if you're aware. And your body is going to be cremated, put into a grave, whatever you decide to do. By that point, some of us, they'll shoot us up into space and go hang out and orbit Mars or something. I don't know. But nobody's going to write a history book about you. If there's a year 2350, you probably won't be mentioned in any encyclopedia. There won't be a Wikipedia page about your existence. And that's okay. That's really okay. In fact, Jesus prefers it that way. Because the more we come to grips with our unimportance, and the more we become okay with lowering ourselves for the sake of others in the kingdom of heaven, the more Jesus can begin to work in us and through us. You see, I think developing childlike faith and the idea of embracing our unimportance is just not taking ourselves too seriously. Being okay when you're inconvenienced or misunderstood. Buddy the Elf, the whole entire film, his Christmas joy was misunderstood, but at the end of the day, it won people over. It reminds me of one of the verses from the hymn, Rock of Ages. Yes, I know what hymns are, okay? I don't know if it's verse 3 or 4, but this is one of my favorite lines from that hymn. It says, "Nothing in hands I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. Naked come to thee for dress, helpless look to thee for grace. Wretched to the fount I fly, wash me, Savior, or I die." Embracing our unimportance is a key attribute of having childlike faith. So how do we begin to develop childlike faith? I've got two quick applications for the two attributes. Number one is to develop indifference to the clout of this life. To develop indifference to the clout of this life. Having notoriety, success, money, clout, influence, it's not a bad thing. If it happens, great, good for you. Use it wisely, steward it generously. But also hear me when I say this, is if you live your life as a nobody, also good, also great. Because as disciples of King Jesus, we don't live for a few decades. We live for eternity, which means what happens in this life is gone, just like that. And so if all of our energy and our time and our effort and anxiety and self-will goes into that, then that's going to paint a very odd, interesting, peculiar picture of the life that is to come. And so instead, we ought to develop an indifference to the clout of this life. In Elf, Buddy's real father, Walter Hobbs, the kind of executive guy of the children's book, at the end of the movie, he's like, I gotta go spend time with my family. His boss looks at him and says, if you walk out that door, you're fired. And he's like, all right, deuces, I'm out. I quit. And it took however old he was in that film, probably 60-something years old, to decide and to make that determination. I am no longer chasing clout of this life, I've become indifferent. If I have it, great. If not, you can take it. It no longer drives me. It reminds me of what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 3. He says, "For by grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, having a clear mind. Be realistic with who you are, in accordance with the faith that God has distributed to each of you." So what that Apostle Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, do whatever you can to live a quiet life. So how do I know if I'm chasing the clout of this world or childlike faith? Let me put it this way. Let's say your life ended with significantly less money than you would desire, but you were closer to Jesus. Would you take it? Let's say this life came to an end and the business never boomed or you never got a C-suite job, but you were closer to Jesus. Would you take it? Let's say this life comes to a screeching halt and that relationship never materialized, or you never had the amount of kids you desired, but you were closer to Jesus. Would you take it? None of your hopes or dreams ever materialized. You never took a vacation to Belize. You never had the lake house. You never fill in the blank, but you were closer to Jesus. Would you take it? We become indifferent to the clout of this life when we hold everything of that we have and all that we are open-handed and say, Jesus, you take what you will and you place in here what you will, because all I truly want is to be a child in your family. The second attribute I think that we can look to develop is to throw our identity into our insufficiency. Going back full circle, is one of the most upside down things about the kingdom of heaven. They are weak. They're insufficient. They have nothing of worth to offer. And yet that's exactly how Jesus wants us to come to him. And I think for some of you in the room this morning, this is the first time you are going to realize that. And the Spirit of Jesus is trying over and over and over and over and over again to break down walls and masks and veils and things that you have been building up around yourself because it makes you feel powerful or competent. It makes you feel like you're somebody. And for the first time, the Spirit is going to reveal himself to you and say, no, be childlike. Be different, indifferent to the clout of this life. You are insufficient, and that's okay. That's the way I made you. That's the way I want you, because when you are insufficient, guess what happens? I get to be your all. I get to be the one who calls the shots in your life, becomes the greatest blessing for you, and the presence that gives you peace that surpasses all understanding. That whole idea makes me think of Thomas Edison when he created the light bulb. I don't remember what year it is. Is there a history buff in the room? Anybody? Cool. We're all on the same page. Thomas Edison created the light bulb at one point. And there was a reporter after he created the light bulb, went in and noticed his shop had hundreds, if not thousands, of broken parts and inventions, and looked around and be like, what are all of these? Oh, these are all the things that when I was trying to create the light bulb, didn't. And he said, man, how many are there? And he kind of pauses and looks around. I don't know, 10,000. So you're telling me, the great Thomas Edison, you failed 10,000 times. To which he replied, nope. I didn't fail 10,000 times. I simply found 10,000 ways successfully that will not work. I think many of us, we have 10,000 ways in which we have unsuccessfully but successfully learned that's not what brings me purpose and joy, fulfillment in life. 10,000 ways in which we have chased this and chased that and earned that and gave up that and tried to buy that and that person and that thing, only to realize I've just successfully found more ways in which I need more of Jesus in my life. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10 is such a great passage for this. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. Identify with your insufficiency because you can't do it, because his grace is sufficient. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about what? My weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So how do I know if I'm approaching my insufficiencies correctly? For me, I can tell you what it is for me, is the difference between being transparent and vulnerable with those closest to me. You see, transparency is a mask of vulnerability because it says, yep, I did that wrong. Yep, I messed up here. You know it, I know it, cool. But we hold the control. Vulnerability is handing something to another person that is deep and they could wound you with it. And you say, this is where I am weak. I need your help. I need your grace. I'm flawed. I need your love and support. Will you help me? The more we try to mask our insufficiencies, the more we begin to think we're somebody, when in reality, Jesus says we all need to be like children. Eliminate the fear, the risk of thinking we have to be somebody in order to follow Jesus, when in fact it's quite the opposite. Because everybody becomes somebody. Because someone came, lived, and died for everyone in the kingdom of heaven. Would you worship with us as we continue our service this morning, as we transfer to communion?